I think it's true of humans, but I think men in particular in this, this society, we're quite good at like carrying on and just getting stuff done. And in my case, I had some really, really dark trauma as a child, and I had buried it. Like it was gone. Like I did not remember. I didn't have a conscious memory of it, but that was me, my higher self protecting me, right? Like it was a survival thing.
Hello, welcome to the latest episode of the Wisdom Matrix. I am Matti, the co-host, along with my brothers Travis and Josh. Really excited about this conversation with a great old friend of mine, Smoke Wallin. Smoke has had a distinguished business career, has advised, led over 50 transactions worth billions of dollars. Over the last 4 or 5 years has really been on an amazing, beautiful spiritual awakening that is a perfect example of being able to really have such an awakening while also staying very much rooted in the material world. Smoke's mission is really to raise the consciousness of leaders. And he does that with his podcast, The Smoke Trail, all aspects of his daily life. We get into a lot of really interesting topics here with very tangible takeaways for folks and do so in an amazing setting for Smoke in Sedona, Arizona. So please join me on this next episode of the Wisdom Matrix, and appreciate your being here and your continued support for this journey that we are on as co-hosts and all the amazing guests that we have the honor of having a conversation with. Excited for the conversation. Looks like everyone's technology is working this time, so that's good. And we have the benefit of, instead of Smoke being in a hotel room, we get the beautiful, natural, awe-inspiring background of Sedona, which every time I see your background, it reminds me that I need to get to Sedona, because I haven't been to Sedona since I must have been like 10, 11 years old.
Yeah.
We did a trip to Arizona. Yeah, we drove through Sedona, and I remember driving through it and being there. But we also spent a lot of time in Santa Fe growing up, which has some similarities, but not the same color.
Yeah, it's pretty magical. I mean, I think I've told you the story, but I've been coming here for decades, hiking and stuff. I always loved Sedona. I love to hike. And I was chapter chair of my YPO chapter. And so you get to pick where the president's retreat is. So I picked Sedona. We did it on consciousness, which was new ground for many of the chapter members. We didn't get a huge turnout, but we had about 35 CEOs that came out. We spent a week here and did all kinds of cool stuff: meditation, breath work, sound baths, and hikes, and really, really good retreat. Everyone learned a lot. And then on the last day, everyone left. And then I took a bunch of mushrooms and went up on the vortex, and with a chair and a blanket and some snacks, and spent 5 hours having an experience on my own. I literally, it was a very, very profound experience. And I walked down the mountain. I literally felt like I was Moses coming with a message. And that night called Anitra. I said, I think we should move to Sedona. And she's like, okay, we'll give it a try. So that's literally, we moved like, I don't know, probably 8 months later we moved, and we spent a year, about 14 months in Airbnbs, like trying out neighborhoods, making sure we liked it. And then we bought a house last year.
Amazing. Well, there's some words of wisdom there. Always bring snacks to the journey.
Yeah.
So when you
come back, and a
blanket. So
comfy chair
and wipes,
right?
And wipes in case you have to, something, but just in case.
And also words of warning, because if you sit with some mushrooms, you might be making some life-changing decisions.
Yeah. Well, given that it happened in Sedona, there were probably like 10 other people set up with the same.
It was just me. It was just me alone, which, I don't necessarily recommend everyone do that. I did a lot of my own journeying, as well as facilitated, but I did a lot of my own. But, and some of those were quite traumatic and brought up a lot of shadow material. When you're alone, it's like you have to just deal with it. And it was pretty terrifying a few times. But so I don't suggest that that's a good idea for everybody. But for me, it was a part of my journey. It was important to uncover the things I needed to uncover. And you know, once I found out there was a bunch of shadow stuff, I was like, I guess you could go one of two ways. You could turn away from it and go, I don't want to know, or you could turn toward it and say, I need to know everything. And that's the path I took.
So, and just from a like contextual perspective regarding Sedona and where you are at right now, because this is gorgeous, right? I mean, it's spectacular, and this commitment to living there. Like, why is Sedona so special? Like, why have spiritual seekers and people? I think David Hawkins moved out there at one point in time, right? Like, why have people been going there? Like, what now that you've lived there and you're like in the experience? Like, why is it so special?
There's a number of things, but I think if you think about the chakras in a human body, we've got these energy centers, you know, that are real and that are kind of access points to our etheric body. The Earth has something similar, and around the world, there's spots where the energy centers are more present, it's more flowing of Earth energy. Giza, where the pyramids are, you know, I think Machu Picchu. There's some places at Mount Shasta, I think, is one of those, and Sedona is one of them. So there is there's vortexes, and you can look at a guide and go to where they say they are, but the whole thing's a vortex. I mean, that's just more for tourists to stay off the wrong, you know, path and stuff. But the whole thing is a vortex, and so we're sitting on like something like 600 feet of what kind of rock is this? It's the I forget what kind of rock it is, but 600 feet of rock that's infused with iron, and that iron rusting is what causes the red mountains. But underneath that is a very big, deep aquifer, and so it's just the earth energy just flows through here. So whatever is going on in your life, good or bad, whatever is happening will be accentuated. Like it's like an accelerant. So if you're dealing with shadow stuff, it'll bring it up faster. If you're dealing with good stuff, it'll bring it up, you know. So it's just got that feel. So that's part of my answer, I guess. And then, you know, over the years, it's kind of because of that, I think it's attracted a community of people who, you know, are seeking in some form or another, you know, higher understanding. It's also got the full, as Hawkins called it, the you know, spiritual carnival as well. So you got all kinds of nonsense. You got people doing, you know, fortune telling and all kinds of readings, and there's, you know, UFO stuff and all kinds of things. I don't say it's all nonsense, but there's plenty of like distractions that aren't on the path, that are quote spiritual, but they congregate in places like this too. So you have to have discernment, right? It's not everything is actually on the path here, but there's quite a bit of community that is very spiritual. There's kind of a retirement community. A lot of people, you know, retired over the years, and so there's people that moved from Michigan or wherever, and this is a, you know, beautiful place and climate. Then there's like our circuit, like the YPO Tiger, you know, successful CEO type, who have their second homes here, right? So there's like that whole component. And then, you know, quite a bit of tourism. So it's only 10,000 residents, but I think they get like over 3 million visitors.
What's the elevation in Sedona?
It's like 4,500 feet. So we stay about 15 degrees cooler than Phoenix, Scottsdale, which is a big difference.
Which is nice.
Still gets hot,
especially in the summer. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what about when you're talking about the aquifer? Is there a material like difference in the water? Is the water source tapping into that aquifer, and is the water special?
Yeah. In fact, I live in the village of Oak Creek, which is it's all part of Sedona, but like there's a city of Sedona, and then there's Sedona kind of I don't know, like the bigger territory includes the village. So if you've ever been here, like we're near like Bell Rock, and Cathedral is kind of behind this mountain. So it's pretty easy to know where that is. But our water is like in this neighborhood, we have 6 wells that go down to that aquifer. And those wells are the water for this community where I live. The water is just pristine. Like they don't treat it. There's no treatment. There's no anything in it. The only thing they do, I think they filter arsenic because it's just in the rocks, but it's untreated well water from that deep aquifer in this part of the community. So no fluoride, no chlorine, no anything. So it is pretty magical.
Well, it sounds like we're going to need to make a trip to Sedona and indulge in all of its bounty.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Come on out.
Yeah.
Another fun fact about Sedona and this being, like kind of an energetic portal of sorts is I've been only to Sedona once, and it was about a year ago. I was out there at a retreat, and I, off the top of my head, cannot remember the name of the retreat center, but the retreat center had been opened back in the 80s, I believe, by the community that used to follow Osho, which Osho is a very influential Indian guru, if you will, a teacher, who then came to the West. And there's definitely controversy around him, but somebody that I've studied and certainly consider, at least in the West, one of the fathers or grandfathers of embodiment and bioenergetics. And I know we're going to get into that conversation here, Smoke. But so I had the pleasure of being at a retreat at this retreat center that was opened by Osho's followers. And we got to kick off the retreat with an hour-long Osho dynamic meditation. And that's something that I have, probably done at least 15 times myself. I've facilitated it at least a dozen times, but doing it in this small room, there was 80 of us, men and women, crammed in this little room, doing an hour-long Osho dynamic meditation. And man, the energy that was coming through 80 different bodies was amazing. It was pretty wild. And so I just had, there's a little fun fact in my own personal story around the energy of that place and how powerful it is.
Yeah, I did Greg Braden's 4-day retreat last month here. Last minute, I'd seen him I kind of followed him a little bit, but I was a little bit skeptical, honestly, like until I went to this thing, and I was like, it's here, so I'm going to go. And they had about 220 people, I think. Chris Minion, who you guys had on.
Vincent. Yeah,
Chris did the breath work. So we had 220 people in a gymnasium at the Sedona High School, all on mats, and Chris did amazing breath work, both like 2 days back to back, and it was awesome. It was amazing. But having that many people all kind of focusing and concentrating and and Chris's method is quite powerful. It was awesome. I was super excited to see you guys had him on.
Yeah, he's great. I think the largest group I've been with him in is probably 30 people at a YPO event a couple of years ago in Charleston. But yeah, when you get that many people in a room, they get on the same kind of like wavelength. That must have been extraordinary.
Yeah, it was great. And
say,
as you guys know, I mean, you can have a profound mystical experience doing breath work.
Oh, 100%.
At the level of plant medicine, it doesn't last as long, but it's like it can be equally as profound. And we had people crying and people throwing up and people having screaming out things, and it was pretty wild. It was like,
I like to say in those breathwork sessions that shit gets real weird and wild, but it's always for the greater good.
Yeah. It's always, and I was like, for when I talk to people, especially when they're just starting, maybe just opening up on, to a new journey, right? And exploring some of these pathways and maybe not ready to kind of jump into some modalities. I always say like breath work, like that's you're gonna get a powerful experience, and it's also to be able to bring about some of these experiences just using your breath is pretty eye-opening for people, right? That's cool.
These are ancient technologies, right? Like meditation is a technology, right? That humans figured out thousands of years ago and have perfected over a long time. Breath work is a technology. These are different ways to unlock blockages, and breath work is powerful.
We've known each other a long time, couple decades. I was like, and we really met through the beverage space, particularly beverage alcohol. So it's kind of we've been together along the way, in various capacities in this journey. And I was kind of joke, it's like, and I think Travis and Josh have said this about my journey as well. It's like I'm moving from spirits to spirit. You've been a perfect example of that. But also what I found really really exciting and fulfilling to watch in your journey is that as you've really dived into a lot of things that we're going to talk about on this podcast today, is you've still very much stayed rooted in the business side of things, right? And really worked on how do you integrate, these worlds that sometimes are viewed as very separate, right? That maybe come together in a retreat, or maybe on a Sunday, or there's it's like there's this division, right? This dividing line a lot of people have between the spiritual work that they're hopefully doing or wanting to do more, and then their kind of their everyday professional lives. And I feel like you've done a great job of really working to integrate that in terms of your daily practice, and also about how you present yourself in the world. And so maybe just for the sake of some background for our listeners, when did that really become a priority for you in your life, and really coming into kind of broader awareness for I would say some of the deeper contemplation that you've gone through over the last couple of years?
Yeah, it's funny. It's definitely been more recent. Thank you, and I'll speak to that a little bit. But the origin story is kind of funny. Actually, I don't know if you remember, we were in Miami with Rob and you and me in a little conference room at a hotel, and we were talking about your deal, and we're doing like a mind map of we do this mind map to figure out who the right strategic buyers are and all this stuff. In that session, you guys started talking about your experiences with plant medicine and these retreats. I don't know if you remember, but I said, well, I don't have anything. I'm good. And then a memory came up of something that I mentioned, and you both looked at me and go, no, you have stuff. And I was like, whatever. And so that was
says the person who has a lot of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. That was just 22, I think. And then it wasn't very far after that I got to go to Nepal, and I was there for a meeting. I was ended up working on a brewery business we sold to Carlsberg. It took a couple years, but my first trip to Nepal. In that trip, they took us on we went to see some of the breweries and distilleries around the country, and then we did a safari one day, and we got to go see Buddha's birthplace. And I was in Japanese temple at this giant compound, right? The Buddha's birthplace, there are billions of dollars worth of investment going into these temples that are all over the place from all over the world. Different countries all have their own outposts there, paying tribute. And my friend David Spencer, who's also a YPO, who passed away not that long ago from cancer, but he was there with me. And David knelt down, and he was not a religious guy at all. And, he just knelt down and he started praying. And I was like, oh, okay. So I followed suit. I knelt down and just felt like the thing to do. And I was never very religious or spiritual. I suppose in certain ways I was, but I wasn't consciously that way. Right. And I just the first thing that came to mind was I prayed for peace and love. And in that moment, I had this like electric shock go through my spine, up through my head. It was like a Kundalini thing. And I was like, whoa, what was that? Like, I don't know what that was. I didn't know what it was called. I didn't know anything about it, but it was something. And I was kind of like shocked at it, and just kind of like a little bit in a daze. And I kind of say like that's the start of my journey. Like, I pray to the Buddha, and be careful what you ask for. If you ask for peace and love, everything that's in between you and peace and love comes up. So I didn't have any idea that was what I was doing is a very sacred thing. I was calling on a very high power that would cause me to go through all the shadows, all the things that were in between me and that, which I got to do. And I'm happy to talk about at any level of detail you guys want. But about 3 months later, I got to go to Whistler and stay with Rob up in his beautiful place up there. A few weeks before that trip, he said, hey, the spiritual teacher, Yvonne Rados, who I've been working with, they're going to come visit the same time you're there. Would you like to sit with him with the medicine? And Anitra was coming with me, and I'm like, well, let me ask Anitra. I'm like, I'm open to it. Sure, why not? And she said, yeah, let's do it. And so that was our first journey together with Yvonne and Lana Rados at Rob's Whistler place. And, she had 8 hours or 7 hours of, bliss, angels flying around, like, everything was just beautiful. I had about 7 or 8 hours of hard labor. and literally that's what Lana said. It's like literally was like you were in labor the whole time, and had an energy removal during that. Had just a profound experience that included unlocking a lot of trauma that little did I know would come out a lot more over the next year. But that was the big crack in the armor and crack in the heart.
Amazing. And I remember very well that the conversation that we had in Miami. And yeah, Rob and I were talking about some experiences, and you were there and listening and aware, and then and yeah, it's great. And then and around that same, I guess it was a little after that, we got a chance to hang out in North Carolina, up in Brevard for a great experience, sitting with Wachuma, and Travis was there as well. So it was the first time you got to meet Travis, and and another place with amazing energy, right? The mountains of North Carolina is just really beautiful energy there. That is a perfect place to kind of explore some of these inner conversations.
Absolutely. And you've had Charlie on, and you've had
Alton?
Dalton on. Also, we're at that retreat, which was beautiful and profound as well. That was a great experience. So like that was probably 8 months after that first experience. But in between those experiences, I probably had 35 experiences, of which 2 were facilitated. I can, we could talk about that, or you can move on. Again, I don't recommend that.
We can talk about the pros and cons of that percentage, unfacilitated versus facilitated.
Well, like the problem is it opens a portal, and you can go anywhere with it. And until you understand how to stay present and to, observe and not react to what you're experiencing, you can have a fear response, right? There can be lots of really darkness that comes up. Depending on how you respond, that can be accentuated, it can get worse, right? So, and in fear, you get more of the same, right? You face evil. If you're scared or you get angry or you fight it, it gets stronger. And I didn't know then that if you just observe it, love it, give love to everything, like it will just poof, like disappear or dissipate, or, at some point, you open up a portal. And so that portal can include dark entities, demons, all kinds of things, depending on where you go with it. That's the warning, the caution is like, that's why you sit in a safe place. That's why you have facilitators who know what they're doing. That's why, that's the proper way to do it. For me, I guess, I was called to figure it out myself. I guess I had to experience some of that darkness to get through it.
Let's just say, for the listeners out there who might be interested in plant medicine work, we are highly encouraging you to sit with a trusted and safe facilitator before exploring on your own. And yes, as somebody who has done some exploration on my own, there can be some profound experiences that come through in that space. But Smoke, one thing that I would love to kind of double click on, you mentioned you're sitting in that conference room in Miami with Matti and another guy, and there was that resistance that came up of like, I'm good, like I got nothing in the closet, there's no trauma, there's no shadows. And that's something that I am met with all the time in the men's work that I do. A lot of guys are just like, what do I need this for? I'm good, life is good. And I'm like, okay, let's just talk for 5 minutes and let me poke around, right? I guess this is a 2-part question. Like, what was the point where you realized, oh, actually, I am carrying around some baggage and some dense energy in my body that I could probably let go of? And what would you say to, the man out there who might have been in your shoes where you were a few years ago, who's saying like, why should I care about this conversation? Like, I've got no pain. So
I think it's true of humans, but I think men in particular in this, this society, we're quite good at like carrying on and just getting stuff done. And in my case, I had some really, really dark trauma as a child, and I had buried it. Like it was gone. Like I did not remember. I didn't have a conscious memory of it, but that was me, my higher self protecting me, right? Like it was a survival thing. And I didn't know it. It was unaware. I used the Johari window quite a bit. It's something that, YPO uses quite a bit for, it's the known to you, known to others, known to you, not known to others. It's 4 quadrants. Not known to you, but known to others. So they know it about you, but you don't know it. And then unknown to you or others, right? Used in coaching and things, but it's actually a great lens for consciousness, right? And so they were in my blind spots. Like I had blind spots that I just wasn't aware of. I didn't become aware of some of this stuff until that first plant medicine journey that brought it out. And like, oh, that happened. Oh, that happened. Oh, and then I was like, then it just started. It just was like a crack in the armor. And I was like, wait a minute, there's a lot more here that I didn't remember. So for me, it was like, it took a pretty dramatic intervention, which was, my own doing. I wouldn't have really come to it. I have 4 grown kids now with 3 grandkids. They're all great humans. I was really dedicated father to them, did a lot of stuff. We did a lot of backpacking all over the world, Alaska, Appalachian Trail, Rocky Mountains, all kinds of stuff, really engaged with them. Had a pretty messy divorce along the way. So I'm in Colby, a fast start, it's the perfect profile for an entrepreneur or big game sales, person. And I was like, oh, that's cool. That kind of fits me. And then the facilitator said, well, yeah, it's great. You are what makes entrepreneurs click, but it's also, we make rags to riches a round trip. And I was like, oh yeah, that's true. So I had some big, very public successes and blowups along the way, made and lost tens of millions several times, like literally lost and started over a number of times. I just thought, well, I had the wrong partner. I had this challenge, this issue with the industry. I was in .com, raised $60 million in my .com, scaled up, had 118 people, in the first year, and, was building servers, farms, and doing all this stuff, and was in Forbes and New York Times and all this stuff. And then, we hit the .com wall, and I had to restart. I had a lot of these things in my lens today. I've been able to recontextualize it. I realized that I was creating those situations with my prior trauma where I had this huge interest in creating success and building businesses and doing all this stuff. But the conscious mind is like 5% and 95% is subconscious, where all the power is. And my subconscious was like, you're going to be betrayed. You can't trust anyone. They're out to get you. All this stuff that was buried, not in my awareness, that is much more powerful than your conscious mind. And so that was creating these situations. I was picking the wrong partners. I was in, we'd be on the precipice of like this huge, success, and then something would happen. But, if you looked at my, if you talked to me or you met me, I'm on the surface, successful guys, great family, travel all over the world, YPO, blah, 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 leadership, doing all this stuff. You would say, well, really fun to be around. I mean, like great time. But if you came to me and said, I got a problem, having a problem with my wife, or, I've got some issue, I'd be like, well, I don't want to hear it. I'm like, let's go have a drink at the bar, because I had all that trauma underneath. And so back to your question, like, what will you say to someone who doesn't think they have it? Well, maybe they don't. Everyone has some level of trauma. They left you in your crib and you were crying and too long because they read Dr. Spock's book or something, or you actually had real trauma at a higher level, physical trauma, abuse. Those are continuum of that stuff. And a lot of it has been pushed out of our awareness, and it's what makes us admit, you get separation with trauma. That separation creates a hole, a gap, and that gap is what we fill, and that's what creates our personality. That's what creates the ego self that we go out in the world and do. And I didn't know that my childhood trauma was driving me to be public, be in the news, do all this stuff, these high profile things, and have this like overt success. I just thought, we grew up without money and I wanted to have money. That's what I thought, right? A lot of successful people have overcome their separation through their personality, through the things that they've learned, the skills they've been able to do. It's out of their awareness, but it's still there, right? It's still there, and it's in you unless you constantly karmically come up and cause situations to relive experiences if you haven't resolved them at some point. So these are energetic experiences, right? And it's like, if your body can't process it at the moment when it's happening, like the small child traumatic thing, even an adult, anything, like there's, it happens all the time. if we don't feel it fully and process it, if we do, it flows right through and you're done. But if we don't, it gets stuck. I call them emotional energy hairballs stuck inside. And we get these emotional energy hairballs stuck in our body, in our energetic body, and they cause disruption in the flow of the energy of divine source. And that disruption will keep causing things to come up and repeat. That's karma until we resolve it. I didn't know any of this stuff, by the way. This is all new to me. And, it's just how I understand it today, which, by the way, I reserve the right to change how I look at it tomorrow because I keep learning stuff. And the more you know, the more you realize that there's more to know.
And how, Smoke, one of the things that's been, since we are close friends and we have been for a long time, and also have done business together. And so, and we sort of we've been on kind of parallel connecting paths, various capacities for a number of years now. And we're both in YPO, which is a great organization and full of very successful people. And one of the things that I've really been impressed by is your willingness to be open about your story, especially within that community, and really in full detail, like full open kimono. And how important do you think it is, maybe specifically for your process, but also generally in just allowing people to even begin to think about, some of these things, to be vocal or to be open about, about your experience, whether it's in formats like this, on podcasts. Obviously, you also have a podcast, the Smoke Trail, which is great, and you've been doing now for in your second year, and you've had some great guests and amazing conversations. But you've also been, in front of big groups, of business leaders and entrepreneurs, and telling your story, and how have you seen that kind of as part of your process, but then how does that give in permission for others to maybe start thinking about their lives in a different way?
Yeah, thank you. So it's changed. When I first going down this and this stuff was uncovering, I was like, whoa, it was about me processing. And then something came to me and said, I have to share this. And I think I now remember perfectly because as a small child, I stood in a room witnessing horrific things. And I swore to I said, someday I'm going to be able to tell somebody. This is like me at 4, 5, but I remember it now. But I was trying to be invisible because of everything that was going on. And I said, I'm going to talk about it. So fast forward, I have a podcast. I've done some big public speaking. It was predetermined. It was something that I was going to do at some point. I didn't realize that then, but something came to me and said, you know what, I'm going to tell this story. And it was definitely part of my healing process to get in front of thousands of people of my peers. It's nothing on my bingo card to say, I'm going to talk about child abuse to 2,000 of my friends on the stage. That's not something that sounds fun to me, but it just came about. It was like, I just was like, oh, I need to do this. I saw the YPO has this thing called Lab, Leaders Across Borders, where 4 or 5 people every year to tell a personal story to the Global Leadership Conference. It's very selective. They get lots of people trying to do it, and they pick a small number. I'm like, something made me do it. I filled out the form and I sent it in, and they picked me. Then I was like, oh, I just got picked. I have to.
Like,
how do I even tell this story? It was really difficult to kind of distill it down into a TED-like talk, right? Like a 10-minute TED talk, but it was a lot of work to do, but I was able to do that, and it was definitely a part of the healing for me now in retrospect. It was to be able to get up and talk about it, and now it's different. So now I say I'm healed, but there's always different layers and different ways to contextualize things. So the work is never done. But what I would say is I have no issues with discussing it because I am fully healed, and I went through the whole forgiveness phase. That was the talk. It was about forgiveness. Forgiveness is for the forgiver, not the forgiven. And I was forgiving the adults in my world, and forgiving myself, forgiving God, because I blamed God when I was a kid. And then I got, now I got to a point where there's nothing to forgive because it was my plan all along, right? So I planned this thing. I was like, the only way this entity was going to wake up is if it had severe situation, and I don't think I don't know if I planned it would take, you know, I turned 60 this weekend, so I didn't know if I planned it would take me 55 years to freaking wake up. I think I had a plan to do it earlier, but whatever, it is what it is. And so now I don't talk about it other than if it can help someone and if it can be useful, right? So there's something about me being able to share a story of situations, which I've only shared like a little bit, right? Like there's a lot more that I didn't share, but it's not necessary. Like everyone got the point. There's trauma, but I can hold space for anyone who has any kind of trauma because I've lived through it and I've alchemized it, right? With another word I didn't know what it was, right? But it's part of who I am. So I get people all the time. We were talking about this the other day, Matti, like, getting people who just reach out and say, hey, I have this issue. Can I talk to you? I'm like, I didn't used to get that, but now I get it all the time, right? It's like they feel safe. Why? Because energetically, once you've alchemized this stuff, their higher self knows, he says, oh, that one can help you like that you're holding a certain vibration that is safe, right, to share. So I think it is important for those of us who do the work and do healing to talk openly and be willing to do that. It's vulnerability early on, but it's really not vulnerability once you've healed. It's just sharing so that it can be helpful.
Yeah, there's so much in there that I love, Smoke. I love that you mentioned like the lab conference, leadership being bridging leadership and vulnerability, right? And vulnerability, somewhat of a charged term these days. I always just like to use the word courage to open up, courage to speak. But I think there's something so valuable to a leader, especially in business, to be able to be vulnerable and have the courage to open up. Not everything is just about, leading the charge and persevering and getting the job done at all costs. When I had the pleasure of facilitating a YPO, like private chapter retreat a few months ago, and the topic that I really brought to them was emotional relevance. And what does that mean as like a leader to be emotionally relevant? And so using the action of vulnerability or courage to be emotionally relevant, not only as a leader in business, but a leader of your family, like as a husband, as a father. And there's something so you use the word alchemizing. There's something so uniquely alchemizing to owning your story, owning what has happened to you, and then owning your actions and your belief systems that have kind of rooted out of whatever has happened to you. And so I love this topic of vulnerability and courage and sharing it on a stage with other leaders, because there's so much value there, man. And you seems to really embody that in the environments and circles that you get to find yourself in.
Thank you.
So
And,
thank you.
thank you. Well, I do look, we're all on our own mission of some sort. And that mission is to, we come in here as energetic light beings and we go splat into a womb and we get instant amnesia, right? And that amnesia, so we're on a mission to remember who we are. As part of that mission, it's like, how do you, once you do remember, if you do, and hopefully you do it before your deathbed, right? Like you remember who you are, what you are, and then it's about helping others, right? Helping others. So everyone's got their own path. Mine is like, I'm not. I guess I'm because my path has led me through this leadership and entrepreneurship, and my friend group is a bunch of really successful people all over the world. My path is to help that group, and I'm passionate about that because it's like if you're a leader and you've got 1,000 employees and you wake up, that's going to impact a lot of people, and the ecosystem around that one business. So if we can wake up a bunch of leaders, so you guys are familiar with Hawkins. I know Travis, you and I talked about it a little bit, and I'm a in my early work, I got it opened up, it unlocked the whole, like, what was I even doing? As I went deep in learning, Hawkins was really helpful to me. And I calibrated the YPO as a group in the high 300s, right? So it's very positive. It's a very positive energetic force. It definitely helped me stay above the negativity before I had my own awakening. It was very important to my life. So I'm like, all right, they're in the high 300s. I can work with that. When I went to give my talk in Miami and Istanbul, I was like, can I get the room up to 540, which is unconditional love? And that was literally that was my mission. Like, that was like, is there a way to do that? Could I do that with a 10-minute TED talk? And it happened. I actually had other people calibrate it, and someone who doesn't know who YPO is. I just said, look, I want you to calibrate what the room was before and what the room was after, and it went from 375 to 540. And it didn't necessarily stick. Everybody didn't stay at 540 permanently, but consciousness is this. It's like a sine curve, I guess, and our objective is to move the baseline up, the middle of that, right? Because you're going to have ups and downs for humans. You're going to have that, but if you can move your baseline up to where you're operating from love at all times, you're going to have dips and stuff, but you're up there, and that's your go-to. That's your come from, your normal go. That's powerful, and the more of us that can do that, and that's attainable, by the way. I mean, full enlightenment, becoming another Buddha or Jesus or Krishna, there's not going to be that many people that can do that, although it's easier now than ever before. Everybody who chooses to and wants to can get up in that above 540. You can do that. Like, that's attainable for everyone. 600 is like what we would call enlightenment, right? And so that's, it's consciousness become aware of itself. That's much more attainable today than ever in history, because every person that wakes up actually makes it easier for the next person. And so, but thank you.
And for those who maybe, and Travis, you can jump in here, since, I mean, you're obviously a Hawkins fan since you named your son Hawkins, but maybe for those who aren't familiar with Hawkins and his work, maybe give a little bit of the tutorial around kind of what do the numbers mean? How should we think about kind of just the baseline for most of society, and how does it potentially differ by where you are? Is there a difference kind of in the West versus the East, as an example?
Yeah, Travis, do you want to do that, or you want me to do it?
So I'll just give my 90-second overview. Like, so to reflect on what you were saying for people listening. So the numbers you're referring to is a logarithmic associated scale from 0 to 1,000 or infinity that is in a linear form representing nonlinear consciousness. And the calibration is based on kinesiology as a science, that our nervous systems are constantly attuned to the field of energy and the consciousness within us. So essentially, we are all an instrument that can test for what that calibrated level of consciousness is. So when you were testing for the space and the energy that you were in, you had somebody, a third party, kind of neutral party, testing for that. And that map of consciousness is what David Hawkins, who is one of the most successful psychiatry experts and practices in American history, he developed as a part of his kind of awakening, his teaching, and how he translated what he saw from all of his patients into a practical application.
Yeah, that's great. That's a really good. And I would just say that lots of people are familiar with like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You've got your basic needs of survival before you can have actualization. That's a parallel map. There's a whole bunch of psychological maps that are kind of, parallel, but Hawkins put numbers to it, and and recognize the nonlinear caliber of it. Like, going up from 100 to 200 is not 100 points. It's logarithm log 10, right? So it's 200 times, it's 10 times 10 times 10, 200 times instead of 100 times. It's much bigger. And so it's a way to kind of look at it, and you can calibrate anything. You can calibrate the integrity of teachers. You can calibrate the integrity of texts. I spent a lot of time, reading different spiritual texts. And I started with all the high calibration ones in his books, and then work my way down. And then, even within the Bible, like there's books that are integrous and not. Revelation is not. In the Old Testament, it's like, Proverbs, Genesis, and Psalms are integrous, and the rest of it is kind of, it's kind of the then understanding of humans, which were very primitive at the time, right? So there's a lot of human characteristics attributed to God in it, which aren't necessarily accurate. But it's pretty fascinating. In fact, I have, now that I'm a full-on programmer because of Claude Code, I've developed an app, community, right? It's called Satya Commons. It'll launch at in the fall, but it's basically a muscle kinesiology testing community where you have to be above 200, which is neutrality, and to actually use kinesiology. And so it's a community of above 200 testers who are willing to test lots of things and then share those results. And I've created a whole system to, like Hawkins did in his books, where he had groups of people here in Sedona and other places where they were testing all these different questions and different things, and then he would publish them in some of his books. And his whole theory was like, this is the beginning of the science of spirituality, and this is what everyone should be doing in the future. Nobody's carrying on his work that way. So this is a community where we can bring integrous people together, and we can test. He tested like all the movies, right? There was this, in Truth versus Falsehood, you can look up like 200 movies where they fall integrous wise, right? And you really don't want to watch something under 200. Above 200, fine, and the higher the better. But so what about all the movies since he died in 2012 or 2013, right? So there's lots of questions people have, and if you're good at this, you can test for yourself. But I find that it's true of me, but it's also true of a lot of people that understand this. They don't have confidence that their own tests are accurate. They know it's true. They know this works, but then they're like, yeah, but I don't really believe it. But when you have a panel of people doing it, then all of a sudden you've got some validation. So anyway, that's my little side fun project that is coming out later this year, and I'd love to get you guys involved if you want to check it out.
Hopefully we qualify.
You do.
I'm not sure about Josh, but
you guys are there. You guys are there, and I'm setting it up as a not-for-profit because I think this is a real benefit to society if we had something like this that was ongoing, and the community kind of self-polices itself and admits people who come in if they calibrate above 200. I think it's going to be powerful if I can get enough people to use it, right? It's just you got to get people to do it. But
what's a good example, just like as a practical, good, maybe data point that people would understand? Like, let's take movies as an example. Like, what would you be like your highlights of? Here's like at the high level, kind of mid level, and then where you really want to stay away from. Like, it could be a specific movie or genres. I mean, I have obviously an idea.
I mean, it's all genres, but look, gratuitous violence, just things that you would think of that are just non-integrous are going to be below 200. And I never realized this. I used to watch every movie there was, right? I love Terminator, and I love this, I love Rambo, you name it. I love all that stuff. And I didn't realize that, like, oh, you mean when you witness a murder on a movie and you witness a murder in person, that your subconscious doesn't know the difference. And that's true of murder, but it's also true of lying, cheating, backstabbing, whatever, like all the different human things that happen. And so we've got a situation where lots of the entertainment world is below integrity, right? It's purposely done this way in some cases. Music industry, the gaming industry, all these games where you're killing each other, you're the violence and stuff, and you're entraining people, right? So your kids are sitting there in front of a screen entrained to this, and the music and all this stuff. It's not just like the violence, it's the music, it's all of it, and you're entrained. And there's lots of music like this, or certain rap music, certain there's just like negative entrainment stuff, and these are luciferic and satanic forces that are embedded in our society that are trying to drag people down. I mean, it is black and white. It's not a I'm worried about, it's not morality. It's real integrity and separation from God, from love. And then there's, movies that calibrate higher. So, I mean, I don't have the list in front of me, but Truth versus Falsehood is Hawkins' book that he calibrates a whole bunch of stuff like this. But you can look at, lots of things. You have a knowing, right? Discernment. You can kind of see most of the politicians are below 200. I mean, they just, because of, they're for lots of reasons we can talk about, but I think it's a really useful tool. So if you're a parent and you've got young kids, I mean, wouldn't it be useful to be able to go on the site and see, like, here's 100 movies that are above 200, so they're integrous, so they would be okay to watch for your kid, and then here's 100 movies or 1,000 movies that are not integrous and they shouldn't watch it. And you could do that for games, you could do that for music, you could do that for anything. So I think it would be quite useful for young parents, especially people that don't know how to do this, and but they want to do the right thing, right? So that's the idea.
Yeah, I love this, Smoke. And I've looked at a lot of the consciousness calibrations stuff out there and follow it, right? In the threads. But I have been so desiring, because a couple years ago, actually my wife and I, Danny, hosted a map of consciousness workshop. And it was based on the map by David Hawkins. And so I would love, like, as you get this off the ground, like, and maybe this could be part of our kind of wisdom summit that we're looking at putting together for the Wisdom Matrix and My Wellness. But it would be awesome. I would love to,
in Sedona, we could host it.
Yeah. I mean,
Yes.
I would love to co-host a map of consciousness workshop with you, helping to promote the app and doing like as many, like, what would be really cool is the run up. We could do as many calibrations as possible, right? Like, to start seeding and kind of like filtering, right? Like everything that's coming in, and, just for the playfulness of it. But also for the data, like to actually, like, bring that in would be really cool. I'd love to be a part of something.
Love
like
it.
that.
I'm a vehicle to try to help do this. It's not like I'm just trying to get people to do it with me, right? It's like I literally set it up as a not-for-profit so that it just goes on forever. And if we can get a community doing it, how powerful would that be?
Yeah, I think that's great. And earlier, before you jumped on, Smoke, Travis, Josh, and I were talking about something. I referenced divine breadcrumbs, and in a lot of ways, it's a great example of that, right? It's like you've got the breadcrumbs in front of you, and through the work you've done in exploration, and then the deep really research, right, that you've dove into. Things start opening up, and then it's the opportunity to just follow those instructions, but then to share. And I think the sharing piece is so critical in all this, because we can have all these experiences and learn all this, and it can help us. And I think if we're helping us, it'll help others by just kind of association. But the more we can share, it just has a
Matti, I think
compounding impact.
that's a really important thing, and it will maybe shift us to the embodiment stuff that we wanted to talk about, because, and you said something early on about, well, you've been able to integrate staying in business and doing this. Look, I think historically, people who were waking up, generally did it in a monastery or a ashram, or if they happen to be noticed in their village and the village had a tradition of this, they could be brought into a system, and that system is technology that works, and that they would help that child get to a certain level. And those monks and folks in caves and things have been holding humanity together for thousands of years. Like those small number of people have kept the field high enough that we didn't destroy ourselves already. And so, but I think I love Siri Aurobindo. Travis, you and I talked about it on my when you were on my podcast. But Siri Aurobindo was this great, of course, my phone starts buzzing when I say his name, because it's an iPhone. He was in the early part of the 1900s, and he was part of the Free India movement, and they put him in jail. The British put him in jail, and he was in solitary confinement for a long time. And in that cell, he woke up. So he was meditating, and he had an awakening. When he came out, he was like, well, I'm not going to fight for independence, but I'm going to fight for awakening. And so he wrote a bunch of stuff, over many years. And his main philosophy is like the the divine life. His book is The Divine Life. And what is it? It's about bringing divinity into the living world. So it's not about going and living in a cave or an ashram or some place of worship, which is very powerful, very important, has saved society, humanity for many years. But today our challenge is, how do we embody it? How do we bring divinity into the actual living world that we're living in? Which is, you could say it's a lot harder, because you have all the distractions of human interaction and all the things in the material world. It is a lot harder in some ways, but also it's easier now than it ever has been, because humanity is rising in their consciousness. So I think that's the big challenge that we have. And so embodying this and being able to live and function in the real world and carry on. If you wash dishes, I love, like, Brother Lawrence, the discovering the divinity or God in everyday life, right? You're washing the dishes, you're doing your chores, whatever you're doing. If your intent, if your come from is divine, it's a divine act. If you can peel potatoes in resentment because you're stuck in the kitchen, or you can peel potatoes with love that you're going to feed your family or the people that you're feeding, it's a divine act if you're doing it from love. There's nothing you can't do that comes from love or not love, right? So business is the same thing. We can do deals, we can do transactions. I can do my M&A around the world and sell companies and things. It's from integrity, from love, and looking for the best outcome for everyone. I have to succeed and close deals, but it's not to hurt someone. It's for the best outcome. And I think we can all do that and set that example. And I think that's the future of humanity. Like, if we can do that, there's more and more of us that are doing it today. The last year I've been spending, and Josh, you and I kind of connected on this, but like, I've been spending a lot of time on embodiment. What is that? The first couple of years was like, what is it? Shadow work, and then understanding the map and understanding, like, what are we looking at? What are we talking about? But that was a lot of cerebral, like, more mental stuff. And I made a lot of progress, but I realized in this embodiment work, like, oh, I still have stuff in my body that's like part of the trauma that I went through. I've cleared emotionally, but it's still like, there's still bits and pieces stuck. How do you bring that divine light into your human form? And, there's some teachers I discovered more recently, Dr. Sue Morter, Judith Blackstone, Miranda McPherson, all women. And they're all in this, like, divine feminine energy, bringing the enlightenment to your body and not just your head. Like, the male masculine approach to enlightenment has been very stark. It's about, like, Zen,
It's like
no
the
thoughts,
the stoic
it's
approach.
negation, the path of negation, right? Which is great. It's amazing, but it misses, like, a whole warm piece of things, which I think the feminine energy is real, and we all have it. Like, it's not about being a male or female. It's about embodying that energy, but it's been very powerful. I got to talk to Dr. Sue this week. I was like, I've been listening to her books and doing her work, and it's really powerful, and she's amazing. And so I'm in her little subscriber club, and I noticed, oh, they're doing a class. I'm like, okay. So I clicked on the Zoom, and I didn't realize it was like a live class with Dr. Sue, and 190, of which I think there was 187 women. Like, I mean, it's very, like, there's not a lot of guys on this thing. I saw one guy with his wife, but I was the only guy that I saw, like, alone. And so I'm like, okay, I'm listening to her talk, and people are asking questions, and something came up, and so I raised my hand, and they picked me. Look, maybe because I was, like, one of only a couple of guys.
The token dude on the call.
Yeah, so I got to talk to Dr. Sue, which is awesome. It was really a good experience, and asked her some questions about it. And my question, I'll say it to you guys. So she does a lot of stuff with the chakras, 12, 11, 10, 9, and 8, which are outside of our body. We're used to the 7 chakras in our body, right? But there's these chakras that are above, that are outside, they're in our etheric field. So she does a lot of work with that. It's really powerful. And I was like, my question was, okay, am I just becoming more aware of the energy that's flowing through me as I'm feeling this energy? I'm seeing the energy. If I close my eyes, I see energy flowing through now, and she likens it to like Niagara Falls, like the mist And the more we embody it, the more that mist turns into form. It's constantly moving, but it's embodying, right? So I'm like, I'm experiencing that. And I said, but am I just becoming more aware of it and it's always been there? Or is it increasing by doing this? And the answer was both. Like we always have this happening, but what we focus on and what we concentrate on increases, like whatever you spend time on. If you spend time on negative things, positive things, whatever it is, so you're actually increasing it by spending time in these subtle energies, right? Like becoming aware of it. They're getting bigger. You're opening up the spigot, but they've always been there to some degree. We've always never not been a divine being. We just aren't aware of it. So anyway, that was my question, and that was her answer, which I thought was pretty good.
Yeah, it's like being a magnet, right? It's like the magnet is getting stronger and stronger, but it never stopped being a magnet, right?
Totally. And Gurdjieff, with the fourth way, I don't know if you guys have studied Gurdjieff, but like he was on the same thing, but he's like a little bit starker, more masculine approach. But it was about the subtle energies, and humans are mechanical, animalistic until they get control of their thoughts and emotions. And what do I mean by that? Well, in Hawkins, it was when he wrote the books, it was like 78% of population in the world is below 200, below integrity. Well, that makes sense. They're just earlier. It's not better or worse. They're earlier in their development. So it's like preschool, pre-K versus high school versus grad school versus whatever in terms of this scale. It's not like a pre-K kid is not less valuable, less important, less good than someone who's getting their doctorate, but they're earlier in their development. That's what consciousness is. So most of humanity has been way down, way below, and we can see it in the wars and all the activity nonsense that's out there. It's now less than that. I calibrate it like it may be only 70%, but it's gotten a lot better, but it's still like the vast majority of humanity is below that. And so, yeah, so I don't know where I was going with that, but
one question just to kind of maybe dive a bit into that more and from a kind of a practical application sense is, so in your daily work, I mean, you're advising on deals, you're interacting with a lot of different types of people, some higher, some lower. This is, I mean, unless you're sitting in a cave alone and you're going to be in the real world, you're going to be encountering all kinds of different personality types. So when you're in a position where you have to engage, right, and someone is from kind of the lower levels, and you like, what tools have you found most useful in allowing yourself to kind of maintain a certain level of consciousness in a situation where it's really easy to be knocked asunder, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I've found in a lot of my journey, and we've talked about this a lot. It's like everything can be going just great, right? And then all of a sudden something happens, or you have to encounter, or you're encountering someone who then it just the energy just shifts. And it's how do you maintain that kind of equilibrium or that higher state in a situation that you can't just kind of shut the door and go somewhere else?
Yeah, great question. It's so true, right? That's what makes it hard. It's about like maintaining a level of equanimity, like where you're constant no matter what's happening around you. Easier said than done. But after that first medicine journey with Avan, he said, we were kind of debriefing. We were all sitting around, and I was trying to understand what happened. And he's like, he mentioned something about having all these thoughts that are going through your head, and I was like, I never really thought about that. And then as I dug deep into that, I'm like, we have 80 to 90,000 thoughts a day going through our heads. They're not even our thoughts. They're just the thoughts of that field, of that level of energetic, where we are vibrationally, we're getting those thoughts. So if you're angry or in shame, feeling guilt, or whatever level you are, you're going to have thoughts that are almost identical to everyone else that has in that vibrational state. The story will change for you, but it's the same stories. If you're coming from a place of love, you're going to get mostly thoughts that are like that. And so once I understood that, I was like, whoa, I never realized that. My thoughts were me. No, they aren't. They actually are these thoughts that are coming through. So as we get better at observing thoughts, we get more control of it. And I love this analogy. It's almost like the Iron Man, Tony Stark, when he's like, no, 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 no. And he picks the right thing, right? It's like So you can do that with your thoughts. You can do that with your thoughts. So if you wake up in the morning and, you've heard the phrase like getting off on the wrong side of the bed. Well, what is that? Like, so I think that's like you wake up and immediately you have some anxiety thought about something that's, you owe, it's money, or it's like you have to have this meeting with someone that you don't want to meet with, or whatever. It could be anything. Your boss is annoying. It could be anything. If you do Tony Stark on it, you can say, nope, don't energize it. Because if you energize it, it cascades and it builds. And then you start your day on the wrong foot, and you go from there to you have negative experiences all day. So if you do the Tony Stark thing, you're like, all right, nope, 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 yes. So then you're not really controlling your thoughts. You're choosing what to energize. And so then you're putting energy between a loving thought, a positive thought, something that's beautiful and wonderful. And then you energize that and it follows. So that's how you start your day. When you go into meetings, like literally, I imagine the meeting, I imagine the people I'm meeting with, and I think about the room, and I send love into the room and say, for the greatest good, I just send love to the room. When I show up, it's like people are like glad to see me because I sent them love, by the way. And then, can we have difficult people and situations? Yeah, of course. But it's like, I can see right where they are. If you can recognize where someone is, you don't have to get like, it's not personal. It's like, that's where they are. So it's like, okay, how do I talk to that person to be as constructive as I can to help them where they are? Because you can't see above the level you're at. So whatever consciousness level we are, so I know that there's all these, entities and beings and things that are way above me, and I can't see them and I can't relate to them because I'm only where I am, but I can see everything below me. So as we raise our own consciousness and we get control of those thoughts and those emotions that are tied to those thoughts, then you don't get rattled. You don't get upset when someone's being a jerk in a meeting and they're being unrealistic, or they're just being non-integrous. We just see where they are. And now, is there something I can do to help them? Or, do I have to stand firm and say, no, we're not going to do it that way because you are not coming from integrity? It doesn't mean you're a pushover, but it means you're aware of the situation. So I gave a talk to a YPO group that came out here, and I talked about meditation, this whole thing. And one of the CEOs in the Q&A said, it sounds, everyone keeps talking about this. It sounds all good, but what does it really do for me? I'm running a company. And I said, well, what if, you get an angry customer, an angry investor, an employee who's got a problem, and they come at you hard and they're like angry and they're yelling at you and they come at you. What if you could answer them without reaction? What if you could take a moment and you could think about what are all the ways that where is he coming from? What is he really saying? Why is he upset? And how do I respond in the best way that would help the situation? If you could do that every single time, would that be powerful for you running your company? He's like, oh yeah, because I get angry. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, well, that's what this work does. So it is about embodying it and being able to live in the world with a bunch of nonsense. I was in New York in Times Square not that long ago for a family office event, and I just walked around Times Square for like 2 hours, and it was an experiment because you can see the worst of humanity in a very small, geography, right? Just the nonsense. People shopping like crazy, partying, angry, like everything under the sun, right? There's, good and bad, but there's lots of nonsense. Can I walk around in complete equanimity? Can I walk around in complete peace and harmony in this environment? And it was just like for fun for me, just an experiment, just to do it.
I love that you mentioned that, Smoke, because it is something that similar to that. I travel a lot for work, right? I'm facilitating these retreats all around the country, and the airport can be such a drag environment, right? So a practice that I do is, can I spread the field of love in the airport? So I love walking around the airport, and can I just make eye contact with somebody and exchange a smile? Can I pay for somebody's coffee behind me in Starbucks, right? And like just this from an energetic, embodied place, can I spread the field of love throughout the airport so that people feel more joy? And it's like this really subtle thing, and I know it seems a little wacky, but that is an embodiment practice, right? And so my question to you is, we've mentioned meditation, which I wholly agree that meditation, an aspect of embodiment, right? It's an important tool to be able to sit still, to observe our thoughts, and then to learn that we can engage and disengage, right? But what are just some very like ground and pound, practical, brass tacks embodiment practices that either you do or that you would recommend somebody do who might be new to this?
I think it's really important to have a routine and to be consistent. And so meditation is part of that. I mean, for me, I have a full spectrum sauna I use every morning. I kind of do a meditation, then I go in there and continue it sometimes, or just, put on a sound bath or something and just, sweat like crazy, do my hot tub after that. Then I kind of start my day. Like that's my first hour and a half of the morning is that. Like every morning that I'm home, I do that. What happens in my experience is meditation, I think it's really useful to have dedicated meditation time, but it turns into contemplation all the time. So what happens is you just get to a place where you're almost in a meditative state throughout the day and throughout your interactions. And you're like, yeah, I'm having a conversation with you guys, but I'm also aware of the conversation. I'm actually aware that I'm sitting here. I'm aware of the outside. I hear the birds. I hear the hummingbird keeps coming over here. I'm just present and aware of it while we're talking. So I'm not completely lost in the discussion. I'm also in a contemplative state. That took a few years to get to being that way, walking around that way. But I think just stopping and breathing.
If I can jump in there, that's such an important point. I just want to put a note in it because what you just described, and you said it took a couple years to get there. What you just described was a shift in your experience of life becoming a more dominant state of awareness. Like it's no longer the mind juggling. It's no longer layers of consciousness, flowing. It's the awareness permeating through that has stabilized your presence, which is really beautiful, and allowed for that shift from meditation being a practice to the meditative state becoming contemplative from that place, which I think is what Alan Watts considered like the floodlight versus the spotlight of the ego, right? The floodlight of the awareness. So I just want to point that out because that dominant state of awareness to me is like, that's the gift of it all.
Yeah.
Is so powerful.
And just to really tie this whole conversation we've been having together, this is why starting with your pain and doing the shadow work and the trauma work is so important, because once you can, in order to rest in that awareness more often, it requires you to do that work and dissipate and dissolve the energetic and karmic baggage. I like to use that word baggage that you're carrying around. And so when you can lessen that, more of you becomes available. And there's really, like you mentioned, conscious and subconscious, there's a conscious weight that we are carrying around when we are avoiding, neglecting, suppressing those shadows or those pain points, right? And so that's all very important to do so that there's more available and there's less weight that we're literally carrying within our subconscious. And then that allows for your conscious awareness to expand and
Absolutely.
really become more available and online in the present moment. So I wanted to
it's
put all
really
that together.
And kind of give more specific on practices that I think are useful. So these are like, I call them energetic, emotional energy hairballs, but whatever. They're like stacks of energy that are stuck. And to the degree we don't process something when it happens, they get stuck. So over time, you got all this like layers and layers and layers of it. And so that's the shadow work. But then once you've cleared a lot of it, you have to have good hygiene. Pretty sure we all take showers every day, and we take care of ourselves. We brush our teeth. There's energetic hygiene, and this is a practice that it matters, right? So what are some of those practices that you can literally write down? Anything that, like, the ideal is whatever happens throughout the day, you have some kind of like reaction to something, you process it right then. Ideally, you're processing it in real time, so you don't accumulate it. But we all accumulate
always
stuff.
Flossing.
Yeah, but then at the end of the day, you can write in your journal. You can just like write, just bullet points. These are things that upset me, or I didn't like, or it got me off my track. And then you can tear that up or cross them out and say, I release them. Going through the airport, you might see an ad for nonsense, pharmaceutical stuff or all kinds of crazy stuff, and you might not notice it, but it's going in you. You got to cleanse that stuff. Like, it's all like they're promoting disease. They are, like, most of the pharmaceutical ads are causing disease in their ads, like, because you're going in, you're like, oh, I need this drug now, and then you're like subconsciously you got to cleanse that stuff, even if you're not aware of it. So it's like hygiene, daily hygiene of just clearing the shit, like all the time, just clear. It's important.
Yeah, we're constantly accumulating energy and other people's energy.
Yeah,
right?
I threw it in the chat because I just like it totally tickles me. But you ever heard the term, like, this was something, at least back in my college days, it was like there was this term dumpster diving, and it was like a jackass kind of, right? Like, you literally like people would go jump in a dumpster, like, for, like, there's different aspects of it, but it just dawned on me that we all enjoy, at least this group is talking about very thoroughly enjoying dumpster diving into your own subconscious all the time.
I like to say I'm a junkie for the shadow work.
Yeah, and if we haven't done a lot of work, then you might fall on a bunch of cans and razor blades and syringes and all kinds of crap that's in that dumpster. And if you've done your work, then there might be a little
featherbed
garbage or a little something there, here or there, but it's pretty minor, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Smoke, I'm curious, just on a personal level. So a lot of the embodiment work that I practice and study and then facilitate and teach is in the context of relationships and love and intimacy, and using the masculine and feminine aspects of our consciousness and then all of life running through our body as a way to create polarity. And then that polarity, Matti used the word magnetism, but that then creates more love and connection and joy and pleasure and intimacy, right? So in this context, I'm just curious, how has your journey through consciousness and embodiment impacted your relationship with your wife?
So Anitra did a lot of this work 5 years before I met her.
It's always the women who get ahead of it.
Yeah. Well, she lost her mom to cancer, and that caused a whole thing with her, right? And so she did her own form of it. And so she was coming from a fairly advanced stage compared to where I was. But obviously,
and a beautiful musician.
Yeah, she is. She just finished her new album. So she was in the studio all week in LA, and super. I listened to it last night. It's awesome. It's amazing. Beautiful music.
Can we find that? Is that searchable? Is it discoverable?
Yeah, on Anitra Carr. Anitra Carr is her maiden name and her music persona on Spotify and Apple Music and all the others. So, but the new music will be out hopefully, in the summer kind of thing. Awesome. But there's stuff out there now. There's like you can find the song about the night we met. I have a co-write on that. That's called Love's Magic Night, and there's a bunch of other.
All her songs are about smoke.
No, but they used to be about heartache and sorrow, and but she's got a great. But anyway, so she started from a more advanced stage, right? So let's just say Smoke was in preschool and she was at somewhere higher,
PhD.
Yeah, probably. And then as I mentioned, when we did that first plant medicine experience in Whistler, we did it together, which I think was pretty powerful for a lot of reasons. But I think that can cause issues with couples if one goes down a path and another is kind of staying where they are, and so experiencing that together, seeing me have an entity removal, the whole awakening, she's present there for it. And so she held space for me for a long time. At some point, because there was a period, Matti, where I wasn't sure if I could do business, if I cared about money. I was so I went through a phase where I was like, wait a minute, I don't need any of this stuff. And I was fasting a lot, and I was basically I don't even know if I want to work anymore, right? There was a minute there, and then I kind of worked through that, and that was part of the my process. But there was a point where I shifted to where I was in a really good place, and that energy caused a shift in our relationship, which was kind of around she was so used to holding space for me and kind of being the, I don't know, motherly, or I don't know, looking at, like trying to help me, like not bouncing off every wall like a dumpster fire. In my shift to where I was like, wow, I'm at peace. I'm not drinking anymore. I'm like, that vibration wasn't a need, right? So then it shifted. And then she was like it was like the sand below her feet was shifting, right? And so it was like, what does this mean for us? Like, and what does it mean for my role? And so she had this like whole phase of questioning. Just took a little time to settle down, and her to realize like, well, no, I don't need her to like mother me and like look out for me. I need her to be a awake, conscious partner, and focus on this journey together. And and she was at a place where like she's like, I'm already at peace, so I don't need to keep working on this stuff. And I was like, no, I have to figure out how to freaking, like, I want to see the Christ consciousness. Like, I'm like on a mission. Like that's how entrepreneurs do this thing, which, it's not exactly how all the spiritual people do, but like, it is what it is. But she participated. So, for years, I was like reprogramming my own subconscious, listening to Audible books and listen to Hawkins at night, and a whole, Bhagavad Gita. We've done hundreds of books, and some of them many, many times. And of course, it became part of our night. And so she was there too, and it changed her. And so she's actually advanced quite a bit from where she was before. She doesn't have the overarching drive to kind of continue to kind of find enlightenment, to clear the stuff, because she's in a very happy place, but it's settled down, and it's been great. It's been kind of a cool journey to experience. But you do change in this process, right? And that shifts things. I have other relationships, other family that have cut me off, like completely won't speak to me, because I have spoken publicly about childhood that is extremely embarrassing to the family, extremely embarrassing to the people, the adults that were around, and they can't accept that. And so there's a whole section of family that have literally been cut out of my life. And for a little while, I was like, wow, what does this mean? Like, but now I'm like, okay, that is their choice. And if I can't make anyone else face their own stuff. And me facing it and being public about it causes them pain. That's not my intention, but it's a reflection of where they are.
I mean, I love how it's a great example of as you go through this path of awakening, let's just say, so much more becomes available to you. Love, like all the good stuff, the bliss, the love, the Christ consciousness. Not enough people talk about what you lose, right? Like, I mean, that's real. Like you lost real relationships with real family members as you've navigated your path, right? And so how has that impacted your journey? Like the loss of what no longer can reside at the frequency that you're now inhabiting.
The hardest thing has been like the collateral damage, right? So there's like siblings and my kids who have relationships with these people, and so there's a lot of like, what happened? Like, why are they behaving this way, Dad? Why like, if someone remembered severe trauma as a child and they're willing to talk about it, and your reaction is, I'm going to cut you off if you talk about it, obviously there's something there. Right? It's like, I mean, if you disagree, then you would probably say, oh, that didn't happen. Okay, well, no, you just cut me off. You won't speak. Because it's like, it's hard, and everyone did the best they could at the time they could, and it was part of the journey, right? But it's the other people, like my kids are all adults, they're having families and kids, and it's kind of bizarre, because I was the organizer for like the gatherings, like let's get everybody together. I would cause everyone to travel and do these big family things, and I'm still doing it, but I'm doing it with our family and not the bigger family, because people don't want to do it. Mm-hmm. But I think there's people who are just they don't understand, and so there's a lot of confusion. And early on, I was tiptoeing around it and like trying to figure out like, how do I help? Can we talk about this? Can we, I was trying to like make it about like what I'm doing, and the reality is it isn't about that. I I have love and hold space. I send love to everyone involved. It's truth or not truth. I don't have any other way to operate, honestly. Like I can't, there's no compromise I could make that would appease the untruth that is causing the disruption. I sit in my truth, have a clean conscience, and this took a while to get to. Like, so it wasn't like overnight. I was like, oh, okay, and it's not it's not that I'm, it's not. I don't have like some sadness about parts of it, right? Like there's elements of it, like it kind of makes me sad that I see that, but it's really, I'm also like perfectly clear, and I come from love, I give love, and that vibration is painful if you're not in that vibration, right? That's the problem with like darkness is we have to have the contrast, right? To learn. That's what we're here to, as consciousness. You couldn't learn anything if everything was just love and light. You'd never have any contrast. You would never learn anything. So we're here. The darkness is a part of the journey. It's part of what we're supposed to experience so that we can appreciate the light and love. If you're stuck in that low vibration density, and you're just kind of surviving in that, and someone is at a very different level, it's literally painful to be around. Like it's like law of attraction. It's also the repulsion, right? It's like you're repelled away from it. So that happens in families. It happens in, couples. It happens in every which way. And, it can be part of the journey. Doesn't have to be, but you're not going to relate to the same people. And this happens. It's like law of attraction, right? Like all this manifesting stuff, everybody's familiar with that in our circles, right? And I love all that new thought. I studied all those books and love just that whole body of work. But the thing that whole manifestation lane misses, they're right about a lot of it. Like they're right about, but they miss one piece. None of them talk about shadow work and alchemizing it and getting that stuff handled. So the manifestation works, but it is very constrained or doesn't work fully if you've got these shadows that are much stronger counterweights to them, in our dumpster fire consciousness dive. So you have to have both, but all that manifestation stuff is amazing and is like powerful stuff if you do the shadow work.
Right.
And that's what they don't tell you on like The Secret and all these like, lighter versions of the manifestation. It's like, they don't talk about that stuff. They just say you can just manifest anything you think. Well, yeah, kind of. But if you raise your vibration because you've alchemized the shadows and you can move up to these higher levels, what you hold in mind does tend to manifest. Like you can actually make things, because you're closer to divinity and everything is God. So the closer you get, the more what you think happens. But you can't maintain that if you haven't done that other work.
Yeah, that's
just so much good stuff.
Let that land for a second. One thing, smoke, and we've brought it up a couple times, and I always, it's always interesting speaking to people who maybe have had their first experience with plant medicine. I see this a lot. If they'll go down to Costa Rica or the jungle and maybe sit with ayahuasca as an example, and they come back and their mind is just kind of like they're cracked open, and it's like, and they're at this moment of what do I do next, right? And there is that instinct of like, well, I have to change everything, right? I want to move away from the material world.
I'm gonna leave my wife. I'm gonna leave my job. I'm gonna leave my town. I'm gonna do everything.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'd say that the best facilitators and the best retreat centers and stuff, they'll usually have a little bit of like, okay, let's just remember, don't make any major life decisions immediately after some of these experiences, and because you have to integrate, right, and you have to kind of let it settle down. But a guest who was on the podcast a while back, Dalton Follows, who
Yeah.
He made a comment. It was like, there's always in the spirituality, there's this, it's like the monk on the mountain or in the cave, right? And, it's like where we are right now as a society and in the world, it's really, it's like the time is for the monks to come down, right? Like, and to really be part of the material world in a way that I think, we've always had our challenges, but I think even, now more than any time, I think probably in the history of the world, it's like there's the importance of really integrating that work into kind of the everyday existence of everyone around us. And and as people become more open, right, and the overall level of consciousness is increasing, I think it's starting to occur to people more and more that that is a path that that they're being kind of pulled towards, right? And so there's just the acceptance of it, and I think that's where you see it, where people who maybe in their past you've had a relationship with, that they would reach out and you'd have lunch and you'd be talking about business stuff and maybe golf and what they're doing in the summer, and those conversations are still happening, but then they quickly might morph into, and by the way, the reason why I wanted to reach out to you is because I'm feeling a certain way. I'm being kind of pulled. When someone is going through that process and starting to open up, and I always tell people, if they're coming to me to talk to me about this stuff and wondering if they're ready, they're ready, right? It's like the you've already, the
If they're watching
invitation is,
this, if they're watching your podcast, they're already on the journey.
they're already on the journey, right?
Yeah.
So I guess the question for you would be, like, if someone is sitting there and obviously there's a lot of resources now out there. There are a lot of these conversations happening. Like, what would you say would be a couple maybe first steps, that someone could make? Let's say that they're a business leader and they've been so hyper focused on the material successes that we're really good as a society of training people towards, and they're getting to this point where, like, there's got to be something more, but they're maybe not sure kind of what the first step, or the next steps to take. And maybe it could be a book, it could be, a teacher, it could be a podcast, anything. I mean, what would be a couple things that you'd be like, hey, here's what you give, kind of like maybe the cliff notes or the beginning, like kindergarten level, instructions that you recommend people kind of look into as kind of an initial step?
I mean, that's really the topic of my book, right? Which is I'm done. I'm just in the editing mode, and hopefully will come out by the end of the year. But it's a smoke trail to the fire within, right? So it's my journey, but I've written it for my goal. My objective was, what would have helped me on this journey. Not all my friends are going to read 400 books and do all this stuff I've done. Like, so what could I curate what I've absorbed into something that would make sense and helpful? So that is what that is, that is coming out, and love to talk about that when it happens. But my episode 49 of my podcast was out last week, and that's Brooks. So I don't know if you've met Danny, but Danny is she's like she teaches all the psychedelic integration coaches how to coach. She certifies all these coaches, and she's been doing it for a long time, and she's amazing. I worked with her on my own journey. Her new book is The Revelation Method of Integration, that's out, and we talk about this. And that episode is actually it talks about it, and she talked a lot about stabilization. You have this first medicine experience, and you come out of it, and like you said, don't make any life-changing decisions like at that moment. Although me saying, hey, let's move to Sedona was a good one. I did call my wife and say, what do you think?
Yeah, it wasn't, I'm moving to Sedona and you're being left
and you're
behind.
not, right? No, it wasn't that. But she talks about stabilization and what because there is such a movement now. I mean, look, 6-7 years ago when I got into the cannabis space, you couldn't call the summit cannabis summit. We called it the 420 summit because YPO wouldn't allow it. Now there's psychedelic forums, and I mean it's changed a lot, right? So there's a large number of people who are experiencing some form of plant medicine, some form of awakening. So it's happening a lot. What we need is stabilization, right? So you go through it, but 98% of the work I've done has not been plant medicine. It's been all the other work, right? So yeah, those are profound experiences. But it's like, how do you turn it into living and embodying it? There's a lot of, things you have to do. And so, Danny's a great resource. My podcast, 49 episodes, kind of talking about this one way or another, with lots of different resources and people who know about this stuff and what you guys are doing. I mean, I think we're like the bridges, right? Like, what I found in the spiritual community is like, I got a lot from a bunch of different sources, but a lot of it, like there's a whole different vocabulary. Like they don't speak the same language than like business leaders do. Now you can bridge it, like I'm like doing with the Johari window, like that makes sense to people in YPO. So, that's how you can think about consciousness. All of a sudden light goes off. It makes sense. But there's a lot of terminology that is like, it took me a while to even understand. And I think a lot of these things are like, look, they all find their audience, and there's been people doing it for a long time, right? Like way before us. But I think we're like bridges. Like this podcast, it's a bridge to, people who are like successful and trying to wake up, and they're like, well, how do they do it? So we're way showers in a way, right? Like, and that's part of the, I think part of our mission is to do that. In terms of specific things, like my book is designed to kind of talk about that. So hopefully that will be helpful to people. And but there wasn't like a manual. There wasn't like a, something that spoke to me. It was me absorbing a lot of different material and then seeing what was in common across it all, and then kind of coming up with my own. I don't know if you guys remember Scott Adams, the Dilbert creator. I was a huge fan of his. He was awesome. He passed away last year, or at the beginning of this year. He had a show, every day for years, and amazing, great following. But Scott had this thing in one of his books where he called it the talent stack. And the talent stack is, you don't have to be the best at anything. You just need to be proficient at 5 things, and then that makes you in the top 1% of everything. So that could be public speaking, it could be, knowledge work, it could be, different things. But we all know, in leadership, if you can get pretty good at a few things, and then all of a sudden you've got this capability to lead others, right? And you stand out. Well, the same thing works in spirituality. So I call it the spiritual talent stack, unabashedly borrowed from Scott's talent stack. But the spiritual talent stack is, we have access to all this great material that historically was very siloed. Now we can get any of it. So how do we pull the things that make sense and build a spiritual talent stack that actually put them together? You've got this incredible system that works. And that's what I've done, and I'm trying to describe and help people with.
Yeah, that's great. And I can't wait to read that. And yeah, so it's one of the things, I mean, I talk about a lot. It's like we've got this amazing tool chest that we have access to, right? And not every tool is right for every job, and not every tool is going to resonate individually, with everyone. And so, it's if you allow curiosity to kind of lead the way, right, you'll find a lot of pathways that you can dive into, and then those will open up other pathways, right? So and for some, meditation's a great example. Some people really, meditation's their jam. Some people it's really hard. And maybe for some people it's just a couple minutes, right? But it's there's sometimes we get in this mindset of like there's one way, there's one path, and we just kind of like, I'm gonna just keep doing it until it works. And it's like, well, it's okay to do a little bit of experimenting, right? What feels right? What is that? Trust your gut, and then following that, and then it can take you in some really interesting directions. And there is this wealth of knowledge, a wealth of wisdom traditions. And now with more and more conversations opening up, there's this access to these teachers that, to your point, in many ways were very siloed, right? You kind of had to be in the know. And that's one of the beauties of technology and the kind of the world that we live in today. The access to all of this knowledge is so much more accessible.
And Matti, to that point, like there will come a time when a teaching is useful, and then another time when that teaching is not useful, right? I forget the analogy, but like you need the boats to get across, but then then the boats are gone, and you're now across the other side, right? So if you go read the Bhagavad Gita and you're calibrating at let's say you're above 200 because you wouldn't even try if you weren't, but let's just say you're in the 200 or 300s, and that book is in the 900s. It's not going to make that much sense to you the first time. And so, like, it may not be the first thing you should start with. The Upanishads are even higher. And, you read those cold coming off an MBA, it's going to make no sense whatsoever. You circle back to them after you've done a bunch of work and you've done work, the New Thought guys are, I think, a great bridge. So all those guys, Ernest Holmes and James Allen, and like there's a whole genre of these people, which are fantastic. Those are a great bridge in my view, because they're talking about spirituality, but it's more in the lines of language that a business person or leader would kind of appreciate, and it's not talking in such either religious or divinity language as much, but they're talking about the same thing. That's a really good bridge level material. But though, James Allen is, he calibrates in the low 500s, and a lot of these guys are in that realm or close to 500 or above. So you're getting some teaching that is aligned. But then you circle back and then you read the Upanishads. I read the Upanishads today. I'm like, I know what those guys are talking about. I'm like, oh, whoa, okay. The Bhagavad Gita makes perfect sense to me. But it didn't when I first read it. I was like, it didn't make any sense at all, right? So I think the teachings, a teacher or a lineage can be really useful, and then at some point you graduate and you want the next thing.
Smoke, and not to get into a whole new conversation, and maybe we'll put a pin in this for when you come back and talk to us after your book is published. But I've heard you speak about like the hollow mountain, right? And my own experience and interpretation of that as a corporate bankruptcy lawyer who was climbing a ladder, right? That had so much inertia behind it, where I thought this is just the path I'm stuck on, but there was no passion, there was certainly no purpose, and that caused a lot of pain. If you're somebody out there, man or woman, who kind of finds themselves on this path where there's a lot of inertia behind you, and you just feel like, well, I've put so many years into this and I can't abandon ship yet, and look at this life I've created around me and I can't let this all go. But you want more purpose, you want more passion in life. This is it. Like it's trying the modalities that we're talking about, the meditations, the sound baths, the breathwork sessions, getting educated on plant medicine, and then deciding if that's something for you. But like, these are the bridges into the higher awareness, the higher emotional states that we've been discussing, that David Hawkins has put together. And like, this is it, right? This is the way to bring more aliveness, not only within you, but within just your life. And you can stay on that same path, right? You don't have to abandon ship. You don't have to sell all your belongings and go live off the land somewhere. And that's great if you do. Like, trust me, I've wanted to do that myself.
That's your ego mind anticipating what it might be like to wake in and having fear about what you might have to give up. When it's time, you'll give it up if it makes sense. Like, here's the thing, like, we're not really in charge, but as we get connected to our higher self, that higher self is going to basically drive what we do. And it might be that you give up that career and you give up all your stuff. It could be, but it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. And so it's like it's not going to be in our control anyway when that happens. It's just ego mind, shadow boxing. What is going to happen? What's going to happen? Me thinking about like what, no, just if you can connect with divinity, you do it. And then whatever divinity tells you, you're going to do. And that's just going to manifest. Or you can wait until you die, and then you'll have to go do it again and try again. So whatever. I mean, everyone has their own path, and sometimes it takes many lives. Like the Buddha was supposedly lived like I don't know, hundreds of lives, and Jesus was a one-timer. And like, you know, Anitra's, I think, 18 lives. And you can test this, and you can meso test it. You could also do, you know, lots of different methods for it. I'm a first timer in this realm. So I'm trying to figure it out. But, you know, I'm like, what the fuck have you guys been doing here? And I'm just trying to be helpful.
Yeah. Well, I love, like, yeah, because there's so many paths to the top, wherever the top is, right? There really is no top. But let's just say that enlightenment is a word that's often thrown around. There's so many paths to that, up that mountain, and I love the humility in the title of your book, "A Smoke Trail to the Fire Within." Right? Do I have that right? But
Yeah.
it's like a smoke trail. Like, this is just a trail to that fire
Right.
within. So I
So it
love
started
that
out,
humility in
my
there.
podcast is The Smoke Trail, and that was the book, and I was like, wait a minute, no, it is a trail. It is not,
Yeah.
it is just one trail. Pick what you want, follow the breadcrumbs, follow the smoke signals. If it's useful, great. If you want to do a different trail, that's fine. You do it.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say I love the humility embodied in that title, man.
Yeah.
It kind of is in line with, you know, Travis, Matti, and I'll give Travis credit for this. He kind of playfully coined us the three unwise men, you know, as we come together and do this podcast. Like, we're not holding ourselves out as these wise men who've got it all figured out, and now we're going to teach this all to you. Like, no,
Well,
we're just unwise men who followed our own curiosity.
I'm glad he didn't come up with three blind mice. So, like, I think that's a better a three unwise men is good.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, one, I would say you have an unfair advantage because your name is Smoke. So, a lot of creative uses for with your name, but yeah, and I think you know, it's curiosity. It's also to have fun with it, right? To enjoy the process, because it can get hard, right? But I think if you lead with kind of curiosity and love, and um, you know, it can be a really fun and enjoyment filled exploration, and if you lead with that, then it makes it very worthwhile doing, just, you know, beyond just the, you know, the transformative potential of it, but just as a hey, a daily practice that you're, you know, it's like, you know, when you and Anitra are reading and I'm sure you've got an amazing collection of books at this point. You know, we'll have to go over to your house just to peruse your library, but
We'll have to compare.
yeah, yeah, if we combine all of our libraries, I'm sure it gets pretty interesting. But and without a doubt, some overlap. But you know, just have fun in the process, right?
I think that's so important, Matti, and I found myself being like, it was because my unlock, my trauma, my wounds are my portal to waking up, and because that was the path that I was in, and I have been in, I found myself like a little too serious, and I had to reset a little bit and say, this should be fun. Like, it's not just about all this, you know, processing and everything else. It is fun. It's joyful. And I'm much more there, but there was a period where it was like, you know, it was more, it was a lot starker, I guess, in my thing. But I love what you just said. I think this should be fun. There's no reason it can't be joyful. It is about joy and experiencing true love and joy. And all the times we have experienced that, it's just divinity giving us a little peek. That's all it is. Like, every time you feel love, every time you've had joyful experiences, exalting experiences, you see some majestic mountain or, you know, ocean, or you're just like in the awe, you're getting a little peek of divinity. That's all it is. Like, we're getting a little taste. And so as we move up in these levels of consciousness, and you get up to 540, you're in unconditional love, and you get up to 600 and above, you're at, you know, this joyful, ecstatic state. Sounds pretty good to me. I mean, the moment of ejaculation when you're having an orgasm is a moment of divinity. It's how, you know, we humans replicate, but that is a moment of experiencing what God's joy is. I mean, I don't know how people say it that way, but that's my understanding. And so like, it's like, okay, why would you want to do this? Well,
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know
It
about
took
you,
us
but
to get it took
now
until
you're
the
speaking
end,
my
and now
language
everyone's
here,
like,
Smoke.
oh, now I get it.
Yeah.
They're like, you could have just said that at the beginning and it would have saved us, like, you know.
If somebody told us that, like,
Yeah.
it saved us a lot of time.
I mean, now you're speaking
everyone's
my
like, I'll
language.
sign up for
Speak,
that.
Smoke.
Like, and you're like, you know, your ego mind's like, well, my mind's not going to go quiet. I'm going to steer the boat. Well, let's just say you're in ecstasy constantly. What's your mind going to do? Like, how about let's just stay right here. Let's just stay right here. And okay, let's share it with people. But like, you know, I don't want to get out of this.
Yeah. Well, if anybody's interested in exploring that topic more, there's a fascinating book out there that was really impactful for me that my teacher's teacher wrote, and it's called Finding God Through Sex. And so there's there's a lot of divinity to be experienced in intimacy.
Oh, love that. All right. Well, I'm putting that on my reading list. That might be a good couples reading list item. But well, Smoke, this has been an amazing conversation. Really just super interesting, great topics. And we can't wait for your book to come out. We'll definitely have you back on to talk about the book. As we wrap up, what are maybe, I know you've got your podcast, obviously, any particular ways you'd love for our audience to engage with you, whether directly or just in awareness of everything that you're up to?
Yeah, thank you, Matti. You can find me on smokewallin.com. It's easy to find me. Normal person like you guys. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on all the different things. The podcast is on all the channels. I have a lot more followers on YouTube than I do anywhere else because I haven't figured out how to like I don't know, get the word out on Spotify and other things. But YouTube seems to have taken off, and I think we're up to 13,000 or so subscribers and growing. And so subscribe, you know, share it, come check out the podcast. You can connect with me, and, you know, and if you have a company 100 million and up and you want to sell it, you know, I still do M&A, and that funds things like the muscle testing and other things, you know, like and me being able to devote a lot of time and effort to my book and speaking and things and not charge, you know, I'm not trying to make money off that stuff. I just want to help people. But that enables me to do that by doing my M&A practice. And, you know, so unabashedly, if you've got a great company, I'll help you sell it.
Well, thank you. And yeah, for our listeners, do the same. Hopefully we've got up to 13,000 subscribers, not too distant future, but we're early stages compared to Smoke, but we're having a lot of fun doing it. And so appreciate everyone's support in our journey, so we can continue to have these amazing conversations, which luckily are a lot of fun for us. So as long as it's fun, we'll keep doing it. And so far it's been really enjoyable. And Smoke, very much appreciate your friendship, but also the example. It was your podcast that helped spur this one for me. So I am indebted to you in many ways.
Thank you. That means a lot, and I really appreciate it. I'm with great gratitude to be on and talking to you guys. Like it's fun, and it's fun having like you, the three of you have all different, you know, your unique perspectives. But it's I like it. It's like, you know, it's like, all right, this is like, you got to be on. It's almost like when I was on Fast Money on CNBC, and I had that whole crew of, you know, they're all firing at you and everything. And it's like, but for spiritual, it's not as aggressive, but it's like everybody's got their angle. It's fun.
It's a spiritual dojo.
Yeah, there we go. Spiritual dojo.
Nice. Well, thank you guys for having me.
Thank you, Smoke.